there's a lot of people on the line, guys. Almost 40 people on the line. So hello all, and thank you all for joining. Hey, Yoav, thanks for joining. So we prepared, as I mentioned, a very interesting workshop today. The topic that will be covered in this session will be introduction to malware dev. So malware development and malware development life cycle. We'll talk about process injection, fundamentals and types, deep dive into Windows native API function for injection. So it really have like a deep technical, in-depth explanation. And we will have a live coding. So Pavel will present it, remote thread injection with code examples, plus binary reversing. Very, very interesting, very, very technical. And we will also explain the detection engineering, writing and testing code to spot remote thread injection. So it will be very, very interesting, guys. So stay tuned. As I mentioned in the beginning, guys, if you are not member of our community, the cybersecurity community, please feel free to go to our link, scan our QR code, be a friend, because all this workshop session recording will be uploaded following the workshop to our LinkedIn page. So, go there, be our friend, do a small like, or, share your thoughts, and all the recordings will be uploaded over there. Moreover, if you have any questions during this workshop, please write it down in the Q&A. We will have time in the middle of the workshop itself. If not, we will also keep time in the end, of course, to answer all your questions. So again, thank you very much for coming. And I do want to present our first presenter, Uriel Kosayev. Is a very close friend of mine, very technical person. I can tell you from my past experience in cybersecurity. He's also the founder of trainsec.net, which is like let's call it like a company of lectures or courses in cybersecurity. Of course, Uriel will elaborate on that. He also has an experience in cybersecurity professional with strong background with malware research, reverse engineering, malware development. Guys, he's the most risky person that I'm familiar. So don't annoy him too much. No, but just kidding. He is actually on the good side of things. He has a proven track record of working with top industry clients and firms to deliver the best cybersecurity solution, proficient in leading teams, also executing red teams operations, and creating practical security solution. Actively engaged in the technical community through a publication. I know he's also a known speaker in events, and of course providing mentorship. So he's doing a lot. He has a lot of his shoulders, but he's with us to have this workshop. So without further ado, Uriel, start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our session. I think it's like the third or even, I don't know, more. We did several sessions already with you, Elior. So again, like always, thank you for letting us in and knowing your amazing community. So yeah, my name is Uriel Kosayev. With me is Pavel Yosefovich. He will present itself next after my part, but I will also do a small presentation. I think Pavel is much more dangerous than me, so you don't want to annoy him. He's the real deal. I'm just the guy that does the attacking side, and Pavel is more of the coding side. So he's the deep stuff. Okay. So without further ado, let's begin. Let's talk about remote thread injection. Now,
please share your screen.
Yes, let me just share the screen real quick. Okay, so as you already know, me and Pavel, we like to do stuff very practical. Our presentations are very straightforward with really much like, several slides. It will be very straightforward. So I'll present some concepts, some important things that are for me and for Pavel are very important for you to understand, both in the technical side and also behind the approach and thinking behind cybersecurity. For me personally, it's very important to teach people around the globe not only how to apply cybersecurity, how to write code, how to write malware tools and stuff like this, because anyone can learn it and everyone can do it basically. But the way of thinking behind of things and the approach and how to approach things, this is one of the added values that me and Pavel will try to basically give you here. So this workshop will not only show you the attack or the use of process injection if it's in malware development or in antivirus or EDR evasion in general, but also in the part of Pavel, you will see how to detect the malware. So you will write an actual code to detect the malware, the malware that I will write, okay? So let's begin. So a little bit about Pavel. Again, he will talk about himself, but basically he's the author of the Windows Internals book, the very well-known Windows Internals book, and many other books. Also the founder of TrainSec, Simdel, and also a trainer and speaker globally, very well known. And about myself, I'm author of the Antivirus Bypass Techniques book, founder of TrainSec, malware researcher, red teamer, and also do a lot of mentorships, where it's one-on-one or by conducting classes around the globe, whether if it's online, frontally, and so on. So first of all, let's talk about some fundamental stuff. First of all, what is malware development? So malware development, in short, it's the practice of developing code for malicious purposes. Now, when I'm saying malicious purposes, it's not literally like for doing some malicious stuff, like for stealing or for encrypting files and stuff like this, but it's more for the purpose of red teaming. So we, as the good guys here, we're talking like from the white hats perspectives. We're talking about literally taking a code, write it in a malicious manner in order to test and evaluate the defense of the organization, whether it's antivirus, EDRs, mail gateways, and so on, or even sandbox systems, etc. So the reason to learn malware development is one of the reasons why Sun Tzu said, to know your enemy, you must become your enemy. I think it's like the most used slide in most of my presentations. I use the slide like over and over and over again. I recycle it and use it again because I think, I know it. I know it and I believe it that without thinking like the enemy, psychologically, practically, technically, everything, you cannot become a good cybersecurity practitioner, researcher, or whatever. The one who possesses the skills and knowledge to understand and practically apply things has the power to rule them all, okay? And this is why, for us, it's very important to show you stuff behind the scenes, okay? Behind the curtains. So more reasons to learn malware development and malware reverse engineering is not only to know how malware are written, is to have better offensive and defensive skills, because if you want to defend from something, you need to understand its offensive side. So it's both sides of the same coin. Become a better red teamer and detection engineer. So again, if you're a red teamer or a detection engineer in an EDR company, it doesn't really matter. You need both of the perspectives. You need both of those way of thinkings. It's the same. It's both sides of the same coin. Okay. Better understanding of basically your OS internals knowledge, whether it's Linux, Mac OS, Windows. Of course, the most targeted operating system on the world is Windows. Okay. There is a lot of reasons for that, but one of the main reasons is because it's like most used operating system today by endpoint users, administrators, and so on. Okay, so you see a lot of attacks on macOS and Linux. There is an amazing uprise, but again, it's not the same numbers as you see in Windows. Okay, better understanding of OS API functions. One of the most important things in understanding operating system internals is API functions. Whether if let's take, for example, Windows, you have Windows API functions, you have native API functions, you have syscalls, you have a lot of those stuff that basically are functions or pieces of code that you can reuse as a developer or as a malware developer in order to do stuff. For example, to encrypt files, to demand ransom. Let's say you are a ransomware. You want to change the background of the computer or the icons of the files that you're encrypting. Basically, you need to understand how the operating system operates. So if you know what is the registry key for the default icon, let's say, you can change it and put a PNG file and a path in this registry key, and basically each file that you're encrypting will be by default with this icon. So it's like the small itsy-bitsy things. Or how do you actually go and steal browser cookies from, let's say, Firefox or Chrome, like info stealers do, like info stealers like Redline Stealer and Remcos and so on. How they do it? They basically apply or they leverage Windows API functions in order to basically get handle to those files and extracting the content. Again, you have many ways to do it, and it's just like I'm talking here right now in general terms only. Then we'll go practically. One more reason is because real hackers know their stuff. So know your stuff, know what you're doing. It's really important. You cannot consider yourself a hacker, a security researcher, a penetration tester, or whatever, or even a CISO, okay? If you don't like understand even the most fundamental and basic stuff. Because again, what you're protecting from hackers, what they do technical stuff. So if you don't have the knowledge of the technical stuff, again, if you're a CISO, you don't need to have all of the knowledge that we're talking about here. But if you have technical knowledge, it will give you a leverage, it will give you more power in order to actually ask the right questions, ask the critical questions. How is my security doing better? How can I make things better? What are the questions that I need to ask my employees or the third parties that provide me services, and so on. And of course, as a security researcher, how can I assess better the EDR? And maybe let's say I'm trying to encrypt a file using one Windows API function, like let's say crypt file or something like this, and then I can maybe use another function that maybe will change the behavior of the encryption and somehow will bypass the detection logic. Again, in general. So before we go practical here, let's talk about the malware development lifecycle. It's like any SDLC or software development lifecycle, but there is a slight change in whenever you develop a malware. You go in, you do some tests, you do debugging, whether it's static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, you do QA and everything. Then you implement whatever you need, your bypass techniques, in order to bypass security controls like mail gateway, EDRs, antivirus, and so on. And of course, if you want to bypass a specific antivirus, you need to deploy this antivirus or EDR in your own controlled environment, and then do the tests with your developed malware. So you need to literally understand the intricacies and the inner recesses of the EDR, how it's built, how it's written, what the functions are used, what techniques are used in order to detect my malware, if it's IAT hooking, if it's inline hooking, if it's detection of functions like PSP create process, which are callback functions, whether it's using kernel driver, not using kernel driver, how it uses them. It monitors the PEP structure, doesn't monitor them, and so on. There is a lot of questions on how EDRs are operating, how they're doing, and in the part of which Pavel will present, he will actually explain the perspective from the EDR. Again, specifically to detect my attack of process injection, but it will give you some kind of an example. And of course, if I'm running my malware and I see that the antivirus or EDR are actually detecting my malware, I need to understand why it detects it and remove this, whatever, TTP or IOC, this specific of data. If it's use of malicious, like suspicious strings, C2 servers, maybe my IP was blacklisted, or maybe using a list or like a list of Windows API functions that if I'm using them, an EDR can understand that I'm using process injection technique or hooking. So how can I manipulate it? How can I change it? Okay, let's say I'm allocating memory in order to conduct my injection of my shellcode or something. So I can do it both ways. One of the things that EDRs can detect is basically the basically the fundamental thing that any malware or a program that wants to inject a code, it needs to allocate a memory space, and in this memory space, it needs to be with the execute permission to execute the injected code. Very logical, very basic. Now, one way is to allocate the memory using, let's say, virtual alloc or virtual alloc and virtual protect, and basically assign it with the read, write, execute permissions, inject the code, and basically execute it. Now, EDRs will catch it. Again, depends on the context, but whatever. Now, one way to do it is basically to allocate the memory with read, write without execute, which is not so suspicious. Inject the code, changing the protection bit of the allocated memory again from read write to read X to basically read execute, and then execute the code. So it's like doing it like this in another way, and some EDRs in some cases, in some contexts, it will bypass it. Okay, not in every case, but it's like the way of thinking and the logic behind it. So before I'm diving into the practical example, let's overview some specific process injection techniques. I'm like developed a poster a while ago with my friend Nir Yoshua, the same guy that I wrote with him the book of antivirus bypass techniques. And there are many like process injection techniques, and for each Windows process injection techniques, you have classifications, a different classification. Now, how do you actually go and classify technically the process injection techniques? You actually go and how do you know that it's APC injection? You know it because you have the list of those Windows API functions. So the main use of APC injection, you see this Q user APC. So you see Q user APC, so it can be APC injection. If you see a post hallowing, it's a little bit different because it doesn't really inject into like an existing running process. In process hallowing, you actually spawn another, let's say, legitimate process like Notepad exe, CMD exe, or SVC host exe. You hollow a section or a memory space from the targeted process that you spawned in a suspended state with the flag of 4, which is create process with suspended flag. And now that it's in suspend flag, you can actually hollow a space, reallocate a new space, and inject to it. And everything is done while the process is on suspended state. So I think it's like I don't know, creating something from scratch, okay, like Genesis style, okay, and basically putting a life into this process and living it and resuming it. So after you basically inject the code, you do set thread context, resume thread, and basically here we go. You have a legitimate process with an injected malicious code or whatever. Okay, so those are basically the two main categories. Either you inject malicious code into an existing running process, like with APC injection, or with remote thread injection, like we'll do today, or you basically spawn a new process and inject content and execute it to this injected process. Okay, so this is the categories basically. Yeah, so we have more stuff here, but again, in general, it will be something with open process. It will get a handle to the target process. Let's say it will allocate memory. After it will allocate memory, it will basically write or inject the content. It can be a PE file, a DLL, an exe. It can be a shell code. Whether it's peak or not, it's a different story, but it can be a shell code. You can inject it again with Q user APC, with let's say write process memory, and then call Q user APC, or you can use basically other methods to do it. But in general, again, you get a handle to a process, you allocate memory, you write the malicious code or inject it basically, and in the end, you basically execute the injected code again using Q user APC or create remote thread and so on. Okay, so now let's get our hands dirty into the actual and practical demo. Okay, So let me go to Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, we have a basic code in order to conduct this remote thread injection, where we actually go and inject this shellcode. It's a very basic shellcode for message box, which will do hello world, not something malicious here per se. And basically, we will target the Notepad exe process. So it will search for the Notepad exe process in the system. It will open a handle to it. So it will use the open process Windows API function in order to, and of course, one of the parameters that it will take is the PID, the process ID. And by getting the PID, it will open a handle to this process, and then it will go and allocate memory in this targeted process. Then it will, using write process memory, it will go and inject all of this piece of shell code, okay? And in the end of the day, it will go and say, okay, remember the code that I've injected into the allocated memory inside the remote process. Now create remote thread that will actually go and execute it, okay? Go and execute this remote memory, which there is the reciting the malicious shellcode or the injected shellcode, basically. So yeah, this is straightforward as is, okay? So now I will go basically do a build here. I'll make sure it's on release mode. Now I'll go and open it in File Explorer, go to the x64-bit here, and of course I will make sure that I have Notepad instance open up. And basically here I just need to go and basically double click. Now we see Notepad exe, PID, this is the PID. So if we'll go and search in Process Explorer, see that it's actually the PID, successfully injected into Notepad exe. Okay, and here we go, we have the message box, and that's it. So this is how the injection actually worked, like this. And now another very important perspective that I like to show, especially in live. Some people will call me nuts or psycho, but whatever, this is what I like to do. So I'll go to IDA. Now this is the actual binary that I loaded here. So this is the code injection.exe binary. I loaded it into IDA basically, and basically you will see the same code. Yeah, basically it's not like from the assembly perspective. And yeah, so let's put a breakpoint here, do debugging, and yeah, let me just close some windows here. And yeah, so basically now that I'm in the context of debugger, now I can actually see what actually happens. So now the three functions of create tool, help 32 snapshot, process 32 first, and process 32 next, three of those Windows API functions will be used to find Notepad exe. So it will basically take a snapshot of all of the current processes that are running on the system. And just, yeah, that are running on the system basically. And on this snapshot, it will do a for loop and will go process by process till it matches the Notepad exe process, takes the PID, returns it in the REX register, and basically use it for the open process function. So now basically we can just go put a breakpoint or basically do F4. F4 will do the same thing. So it will go and, yeah, let me run it again. Oh, yeah, because I didn't spawn Notepad actually. Now that we have Notepad, let me put it aside in the next screen. Now I can go do F4. And if I do open F8 on the open process, the return value will be the hexadecimal value of AC, which will be the process handle for Notepad exe. And then from here we can do F4 for virtual alloc. And now before we do that, we use Process Hacker, my favorite tool to inspect memory regions of a process. So we'll go to Notepad. Now that I go to Notepad, I'll go to memory. And now basically I do F8 on virtual alloc. So again, before I do it, this is the memory regions. You see only read write here. In this case, now if I do F8, I see the return value is basically the actual allocated base address, or the start of the address of the allocated memory in the remote process. So now if I do refresh, I'll see that I have an RWX region that I've allocated, okay, using the virtual alloc. I not only allocated memory, but also assigned the page execute read write parameter for the permissions of this read write execute. Now, if I'll do double click and do reread or something, basically, you know, zero, nothing for now. Yes. So now that I allocated this memory, now I can go into write process memory, again, F4. And now if I do F8 and I see the return value is actually 1, which basically indicates for me that the execution of the function was successful. So now I'll do here, and yeah, voila, we have our shellcode. Okay, so we see this 4883, for example. Let's go to our Visual Studio, 4883. Yes, this is the shellcode. And in the end, we see 28C3 just to validate it. And yeah, we have it. Okay, so amazing. We have the shellcode injected into the targeted memory allocated into the targeted process of Notepad.exe. And basically, now the final stage is basically creating a remote thread which will actually go and execute the code. Okay, because yeah, it's fine that you have an allocated memory. It's fine that you injected the memory, the shellcode to the remote memory, but you need a thread to actually execute it. Either it's an existing thread or a new one. So using create remote thread with its parameters will basically, it will do exactly that. Okay, so now that I actually use create remote thread, here we have our shellcode hello world successfully executed. Okay, so yeah, I think it's this is the end of my part. Pavel, into your hands.